I'm sorry. This lab isn't like exciting at all. Sometimes you just gotta, button up a few things and get some stuff done before you can move on. By this point in time, we've got the core of our organization set up. So we've got our organizational units organized. Is that the right word for it? And we have a lot of our baseline security controls in place. We have AWS IAM Identity Center. We've got CloudTrail running. And we're getting ready to start moving on to actually deploying some workloads and learning about things like virtual networks, the VPCs, and how to run instances and how to utilize a lot of the other services. All of that said, there's still a couple of small things we need to do. This is going to be a really short lecture because there's not a ton to talk about. And I decided that there was sort of two major things that we could lump in together for today's lab to prepare us for moving on to everything else. The first is we're going to set up our alternate contacts for our accounts. Alternate contacts, well, if you think about it, all of you have probably been receiving some emails from AWS since you set up your organization, your first account, and you set up the labs. And because we have multiple accounts within our organization, you might even see multiple emails depending on what's going on from those accounts. All of those go back to that root user email address. And the way we set things up with our plus addressing, so, rmogul plus cloudslaw at gmail.com or whatever it is for you, then all the emails from all the accounts are going to go into one place. But in a real environment, you probably want to divide up who can see those emails a bit, and you want to redirect them to the proper teams. That's where alternate contacts comes into play. You can set contacts for three different things. Three different things. I don't know. I can't see myself on camera right now. That is, you can have a contact for billing. So all the billing related messages go there. You can have a contact for operations where things like, oh, this Lambda function is going away. Or we're going to reboot your instance because there's a hardware swap out or something going on the back end. And then lastly, security. Now, in a larger organization, you can set those to different email distribution lists. And that's my recommendation. You send them to distribution lists so that the security team sees all of those emails and the operations team sees all of those emails. However, for our labs, you are the security team and you are the operations team. So we're going to set those up just to point to you. It seems like a small thing, but it's really important because I've got 180 personal accounts. And I have to keep track of maybe something from a security or a billing standpoint hits one of those accounts. I need to pay attention to it. In a large organization, you want to make sure that the security team is seeing the security related emails. And they're probably not going to want to see all of the other stuff. So you're going to want to set up that separate list for them, set them up as that alternate contact. Within alternate contacts, you can also set phone numbers. This is also important because if something really bad happens, there is a chance Amazon will go to you. They may also ask you to provide that phone number to validate who is calling them. So if it's a security related thing you call in, they're going to call that phone number back that's on record. They're not going to just trust you that you're like the CISO for, I don't know, the big bank or something along those lines. Going to be pretty easy. We're going to go in and we're going to set all of that up. Now, the other piece that we need to talk about is setting up for our workloads. And we have our workloads organization unit. And remember, a workload that's your application stack. Like all this other stuff we've set up is shared services, it's shared infrastructure. But at some point, we're going to build and deploy applications, and we're going to put those into the workload organizational unit. The reason we have all these OUs, if you remember, is because that allows us to apply service control policies and set up different security levels. So if you remember, we had to move one of our accounts into exceptions so that we could log in as root, and then we pulled it out because exceptions is the only OU where you can log in as root. Well, for our workloads, we tend to break this out at the top level into production, prod, and non-production, non-prod. Now, some people I've seen places they'll have OUs for dev test staging. In my experience, most organizations are going with prod and non-prod because that kind of fits the bill. Now, how do you decide what is prod and what is non-prod? I have a really big rule for this, And weirdly, it is controversial. Anything with production data or access to a production environment at all is prod. I don't care if it's called test. I don't care if it's called dev. If you use your live customer data in a test environment or a dev environment, it needs the same security controls as your production environment. And so that needs to be put under prod. Unless you have a dev organization with even tighter security controls than prod, and I never see that. I've heard rumors it might exist. I also hear rumors, mostly from my daughter, that unicorns might exist. Now, that's prod. Anything with production data or access to production data must be considered prod, because when we build those service control policies and we put them on that prod OU, they're going to be designed to lock things down that we probably need in our non-production environments. But if you have those available in that non-prod environment, like the ability to create an IAM user, that we often will allow that in a non-prod environment. You should not allow that in prod. And so in that non-prod environment, if that has production data, that would create a risk. Now, how do you move things? Well, you just move the accounts between non-prod and prod. So under non-prod, you could organize it by business unit. You could organize it by purpose. So you could have like a dev area where you can do things like create IAM users. And when you have that account all set up, then you move that into prod and those tighter controls go in place. It's not that it erases those IAM users. It's that nobody else can create new ones or modify the existing ones, or at least that's the kind of a service control policy we'll build later. Anyway, so I went deep a little bit, almost a little bit too deep on that, because we are going to see all of this in action. Here's the key points for today's lab. First, your alternate contact information is important because that's how you distribute the right information to the right people within your organization. And that also can be helpful in cases of incidents when AWS needs to contact you or you need to contact them. Second, we are going to set up a different production and non-production organizational units so we can treat the security for our production environments different than our non-production environments. And one of the great things we'll learn how to do is build something in non-prod where the rules are more open, then move it into prod, and then that's the only time that it can have that production data. And that is the biggest key security point that I want you to get today. I'll repeat that. The biggest security point I want you to take away from today is that any AWS account, and yes, I do things at the account level, any AWS account that has any access to production data needs to be treated as prod. I'm going to close with one example of where you're going to run into, very likely, if you go into an organization. They may have one account with prod and development, production and development mixed together, where production is in one region and development is in a different region. Why don't I like that? Why don't I support that? To me, that has to be a production account because the security controls we put in place are done, particularly around IAM, are at that global level. And having different data of different security contexts in other regions is not a good enough barrier for me. And it is bad blast radius control, because if somebody gets into those dev credentials, they could very easily potentially escalate into the production side. So again, being very repetitive, any AWS account with access to production data or connected directly to a production environment where it could get access to production data needs to be treated as prod and needs to have tighter security. All right, let's just go into the labs. Let's set all this stuff up. Only going to take a few minutes. And then next week, we're going to start getting more into creating more of our IAM users and permission set, not our IAM users, our identity center permission sets. And then we're going to start turning on some more security tools and deploying some workloads over the next few labs. As always, as mostly these days, we want to log into our AWS IAM Identity Center Access Portal. And in this case, we're going to do our work in the management account. So that's called Cloud S.L.A.W, and I'll go to Administrator Access. The first thing we need to do is go into Organizations. And region won't matter here because we're doing everything with global services. We're going to Organizations, and we need to go to Settings. There's a piece that we have to, we need to go to Services. One of the services needs to be enabled, and it is Trusted Access. or sorry, account management here. So we scroll down to AWS account management, click on that, and enable trusted access. And then we type enable. You'll notice it's a different warning than when we were working with CloudTrail or AWS IAM Identity Center if you had to go in and make those changes, because this is the only place that you can actually turn that on. Now, you might think that it would be under settings, but these aren't organization-wide settings. The alternate contacts are handled on a per account level. So we'll go back into accounts. And these are OUs, not accounts. But for example, our Cloud S.L.A.W is an account, and that's the main one we had. And if you click on it and you go to contact info, being our current account, we have options for alternate contacts. And let's set those. So I'm just going to add my going personal. Remember, you could set this to a distribution list. That's what you would normally do in a large organization. Here, I'm going to just use my normal email, and I'm not going to put my phone number in here. Believe it or not, bad enough giving all of you my email address. Offline, I will go ahead and put my phone number in, but you should put your phone number in. So 111 -555-1212, something along those lines. All right, let me go ahead, delete that out and save. Oh, it is going to force me to do a title and a phone number. So CEO, and I'm going to pause, put my phone number in, and then hit save. When that's successful, you'll see the success there. And you'll notice this, unlike your root user email, you can use the same email for all of these. So let me go ahead and I'm going to set that up for my operations contact and for my security contact. Again, I'm going to pause the screen as I do these and then show you when I'm done. All of my alternate contact information is now saved. And if I want to do this as well for my other accounts, I'll go back to accounts and let's go into security because that's where we have our existing accounts. And we can go ahead and set our alternate contact information for each of these. Now, unfortunately, this is a bit of a manual process to go through and set up the alternate contact information. This is why we will typically do this using automation. And for our purposes today, for the main lab, I want you just to focus on getting the initial one set for your main account. But I do strongly recommend, and we're going to have a future lab where I show you how to automate this across all of the other accounts. And we'll get to that at a different point. So just put a ticker in that one. Now let's go back to organizations and let's go to workloads for our OUs. And you'll notice that we have nothing within workloads. So if I click on that, there's no child resources in there as well. Let's go ahead and go to organizational unit, create new, and we're going to do our prod and then our non-prod. Action, create new, organizational unit name, non-prod. And that gets us set up. Now, we also are going to want an account, and we can't really do that from here. If you recall, you have to create accounts up at the top level. So we're going to go back to the top level, and we're going to create a workload account. That's going to be our first workload account. And if I click on workloads, you'll see I have prod and non-prod organizational units there. Well, let's go add an AWS account, and let's call this test account 1. That's way we can remember what it is. And then I'll use our mogul plus test account 1 at securosis.com for me. We're going to leave our default IAM role name there, and we're going to just create it from brand new. So let's create AWS account. And it's creating it. And I'll go ahead and pause. Doesn't take too long, but I'm going to pause while we wait for that. One reminder is while you're still seeing that creating alert, if you hit refresh, that will force the refresh to the screen if you don't automatically see it. And now I have that test account. So I'm going to click on that test account and I'm going to go to actions, move, and I'm going to go down to workloads and non-prod. because we're going to start by doing a whole bunch of like open sandboxing stuff. So we'll move that AWS account. Now remember, this still has some service control policies on it. We have at the root level, we have our region restriction. And at the workload level, we have the one that protects the root account and restricts from removing that AWS account from the organization. And so at the end of this lab, you should have your alternate contact information set up. Actually, as soon as we're done, I'm going to set it for a few more of my accounts, those security accounts, because those are important ones. And I do want to see alerts that are coming off of those. And you should have your hierarchy showing workloads, non-prod, test account, and we're all set up, start moving forward. Next week, we're going to actually create some new IAM entities. We're also going to start moving into delegated administration for IAM management, as well as for our CloudTrail. And after that, I think we're going to do guard duty. And then after that, we're going to kind of jump in and start building some stuff. Because I know it gets a little boring doing the shared services. All right, that's it for this week. And I hope you all have a great week.